On March 14th, Arthur Pendleton, a 72-year-old retired architect, received a certified letter that made no sense. He stood in the quiet hallway of his small home, the thick envelope from the bank feeling heavy in his hand. He opened it. The words on the page were sharp and final. Notice of foreclosure. The letter claimed the fourplex apartment building he had co-owned with his late brother for 30 years was in default. The amount due? $82,000 in unpaid property taxes and mortgage payments. This was impossible. The building was Arthur's entire retirement. It was fully rented, managed entirely by his nephew, Julian. The property was supposed to generate over $6,000 a month in profit, half of which was wired directly to Arthur's checking account. Or it was supposed to be. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. He immediately picked up the phone. Julian answered on the third ring, his voice a mask of calm, practiced concern. "Uncle Arthur, what a surprise!" Arthur kept his own voice level, steady. "Julian, I've just received a foreclosure notice from the bank. It says we're $82,000 behind. What is going on?" There was a pause, then a short, dismissive laugh. "Oh, that? Don't you worry about it. It's just a scare tactic. The bank is trying to rush us." Arthur gripped the receiver. "Rush us? It says they'll seize the property in 30 days. "It's a mix-up, Uncle. A few of the tenants are delinquent. I've been handling it, but the bank's paperwork is slow. It's all just bureaucratic nonsense. You know how these things are. I'll take care of it. Don't give it a second thought." Arthur was silent. He looked at the official stamp on the letter. He thought of his nephew's new car, his expensive vacations. "A mix-up," Arthur repeated. "I see. Thank you, Julian." He hung up the phone. He sat down at his desk, the letter spread out before him. The house was silent, but his mind was clear. Julian's voice was smooth, but the numbers on the page were hard. $82,000. Arthur Pendleton hadn't just designed buildings for 40 years, he had built them. He understood that foundations, whether made of concrete or of trust, must be inspected. He was 72. But his mind was sharp. He balanced his own books to the penny, and he knew with absolute certainty that Julian was lying. That night, Arthur opened a new, hardbound ledger. On the first clean page, he wrote down the date, the amount, and Julian's exact words. He was no longer just an uncle. He was an investigator. And this was day one. The next morning, the Texas air was sharp and cool. Arthur did not call his nephew back. He did not go to the bank. Julian's lie was a distraction, a piece of theater. Arthur was an architect, a man who had built his career on facts, on the unyielding logic of blueprints and city codes. He knew that the truth of a building isn't found in what people say about it. It's found in the public record. He put on a tweed jacket, picked up his old leather briefcase, and drove his modest 10-year-old sedan not to the apartment building, but to the Tarrant County Courthouse. He bypassed the busy courtrooms and went straight to the basement, to the county recorder's office. The room smelled of old paper and floor wax. To a young woman at the counter, he gave the property's parcel number from memory. "I'd like to pull the full file for this address, please," he said. "Deed, tax assessments, and any liens." The woman returned 20 minutes later with a thick manila folder. Arthur took it to a quiet wooden carousel. He sat, put on his reading glasses, and began to read. The first document was the original deed, the transfer of ownership to him and his brother, 30 years ago. His brother's signature, his own. It was solid. Then he turned to the tax records. His blood ran cold. The bank's letter was not a scare tactic. It was a courtesy. The county record showed the property taxes had gone unpaid for 6 consecutive quarters, 18 months. The total delinquency, with penalties and interest, was exactly $82,419.50. The county had placed a senior tax lien on the property, a legal precursor to seizure. Julian had not missed a payment. He had stopped paying entirely a year and a half ago. Arthur felt a dull pressure behind his eyes. He methodically pulled out the thin, quarterly statements Julian had been emailing him. He had printed them out, as he did all his records, and kept them in a binder. He laid them side by side with the official county documents. Julian's statement for the first quarter of last year, dated April, property tax $4,500, paid. The county record for the same quarter, unpaid, penalty assessed. Julian's statement for the third quarter, property tax $4,500, paid. The county record, unpaid, final notice issued. It was all there in clean, digital typeface, a complete and total fabrication. Julian had not just lied on the phone, he had been constructing an elaborate, documented lie for months. Arthur's mind, trained to spot misalignments in complex designs, saw the pattern instantly. The money was being diverted, the billing was being systematically bled, and Julian was covering his tracks with fraudulent reports. Arthur closed the file. He felt a profound, cold anger. This was not a mix-up. This was theft.
Now, he would go to the building. He arrived just after lunch. The brick fourplex looked the same as it always had, a little worn but solid. He had designed it himself in the late 80s. Good bones, he'd always called it. He parked at the curb, took a deep breath, and walked up the path. Not as an uncle, but as the owner. He had his original keys, but he knocked first on Unit 1A. No answer. He heard a television inside, but the occupant chose not to open the door. He moved to 1B and knocked. An elderly woman, Mrs. Petrov, cracked the door, her face a web of suspicion. Yes? Hello, Mrs. Petrov. I'm Arthur Pendleton. I own the building. Her eyes widened, not in recognition, but in fear. Owner? We pay rent to Julian. He is manager. Is problem? I'm just here for a routine inspection, Arthur said calmly. I also need to verify your lease agreement. There seems to be a clerical error at the bank. The woman shook her head, her fear hardening into defiance. No paper. I pay Julian. You talk to Julian. She closed the door, and he heard the deadbolt slide shut. Arthur stood on the landing, frustrated. Julian had positioned himself as the gatekeeper. The tenants were afraid of him, or at least afraid of any disruption he might cause. He went upstairs to Unit 2B and knocked. Again, no answer. He had one door left, Unit 2A. He knocked firmly. The door opened, and a young woman in her late 20s looked out. She had sharp, intelligent eyes and was dressed in a professional blouse, clearly working from home. Can I help you? Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Pendleton. I'm the owner of this building. The woman's posture changed. She crossed her arms. The owner? We were told Julian Pendleton was the owner. He is my nephew and the property manager. I'm here to conduct a structural inspection and to review the lease agreements. As I told your neighbor, we've found a significant clerical error in the bank's records. The woman's name was Maria, and she was a paralegal. She did not look scared, like Mrs. Petrov. She looked interested. A clerical error? She repeated, testing the words. Is that what you're calling the foreclosure notice that was taped to all our doors last week?
Arthur froze. This was the opening. Julian hadn't just lied to him. He had lied to everyone. They were served to you as well? Arthur asked. Yes, Maria said, her tone all business. We were all in a panic. We called Julian. He gave us the same story he probably gave you, that it was a bank mistake, that he was handling it. He told us not to worry. She paused. But I did worry. I've been a paralegal for 3 years. Banks don't make mistakes that big. Arthur felt a sudden, immense sense of clarity. He was not alone in this. He told me, Arthur said, his voice low, that the foreclosure was happening because the tenants were delinquent on their rent. Maria's eyes flashed with anger. What? Delinquent? Mr. Pendleton, I have never missed a payment. I pay on the first of the month every month by direct deposit. So does Mr. Henderson in 1A and Mrs. Petrov. The only reason she wouldn't talk to you is because Julian told us last week that a scammer might come by asking for rent and not to talk to anyone but him. The deception was deeper than he could have imagined. Julian had not only lied about the payments, he had actively poisoned the tenants against Arthur, casting him as the potential threat. "May I come in?" Arthur asked. Maria studied him for a long moment, then nodded and opened the door. Her apartment was neat, a small desk set up by the window. Arthur sat at her small dining table. "You said you pay by direct deposit. To what account?" "That's the part I always thought was strange." She went to her desk and pulled out a binder. It was organized with colored tabs, a mirror image of the ledgers Arthur kept himself. "When I moved in, I paid by check to Pendleton Properties. Then, about 2 years ago, Julian sent an email saying he was streamlining the accounting. He had us all move to a new online portal." She opened the binder. "We now paid to a holding company, JP Asset Management LLC. Arthur felt the last piece of the lock click into place. JP, Julian Pendleton. He created a shell company, Arthur said, almost to himself. "Exactly," Maria said. "I ran a search on the State Corporation Commission website. JP Asset Management was incorporated 25 months ago. The sole registered agent is Julian Pendleton. The address is a P.O. box."
She turned the binder around. Inside were pages and pages of printouts, bank statements from her account showing the monthly transfer, every single one, for 24 months, to the shell company. "I've been keeping records," Maria said, her voice firm. "I knew this was wrong. I suspected he was skimming, maybe taking $100-odd off the top. I never dreamed he was taking all of it. He's been pocketing the entire building's rent, over $12,000 a month, and letting the property taxes and mortgage default." Arthur looked at the young paralegal, at her meticulous binder, at the fierce, focused intelligence in her eyes. She was his hidden weapon. She was the ally he never knew he had. "He's been stealing from both of us," Arthur said. He opened his own briefcase and laid the county tax lien on the table next to her binder. "This is the $82,000 in unpaid taxes. This is the proof he's been lying." Maria looked at the official document, her paralegal eyes scanning the legal text. "He told us the bank error was about the mortgage. He never mentioned the taxes. He was letting the county seize the building. We'd all be evicted and he'd be gone with the money." They sat in silence for a moment, the two binders on the table between them, the old architect and the young paralegal. The paper trail was complete. The lie was exposed. "Mr. Pendleton," Maria said, closing her binder, "he's committed fraud. Wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and given the foreclosure, probably bank fraud. He forged those statements he sent you. He created a fictitious entity to divert funds. This isn't a family dispute. This is a crime." "I know. He underestimated me. He thought I was just an old man who wouldn't check the records." "He underestimated me too," Maria replied. "He thought I was just a tenant. What do we do next?" "Next," Arthur said, a new hard resolve in his voice, "we find out where the rest of the money went. The bank notice mentioned a mortgage, but the mortgage on this building was paid off 10 years ago." "A mortgage," Arthur said, his voice quiet. He was sitting at Maria's small dining table, under the foreclosure notice. "But that's impossible. My brother and I paid this building off completely. We held a small celebration. That was in 2014. Maria stopped shuffling her papers and looked at him. Her eyes narrowed. "Paid off, Mr. Pendleton? Are you certain?" "I am as certain as I am of my own name.
I have the deed of reconveyance from the bank, filed and recorded. This property has been free and clear for over a decade."
Maria let out a slow breath. Then the foreclosure notice isn't from the original mortgage. It's from a new one, a second mortgage, a home equity loan, something he took out against the property. Arthur felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. But how? He isn't the owner. I am. My signature would be required for any new loan against this property. He'd need your signature, Maria said, her voice dropping, or a power of attorney, a document that gives him the legal right to sign for you. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the small apartment. Arthur looked at the woman he had just met. She was voicing the one thought he had not allowed himself to form. "I never gave him one," Arthur stated. "Let's check," Maria said, turning to her laptop. If he took out a loan, he had to file the paperwork with the county. He'd need to show the lender he had the authority to act as the property's owner. She didn't drive back to the courthouse. Her fingers moved quickly over the keyboard. "I have access to the state's digital records database through my firm. It's much faster than the public terminal." She typed in the parcel ID, a number Arthur knew by heart. "Okay, searching all filings against this parcel, cross-referencing with Pendleton properties. Now let's filter by document type. Deed of trust." Her screen refreshed. She went still. "There," she said, her voice flat. Arthur leaned in, his eyes fixing on the screen. There, filed 18 months prior, was a new deed of trust. "Who is the lender?" Arthur asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Not a traditional bank," Maria said, reading. "It's a private lender. Apex Capital Holdings. A hard money lender. They charge higher interest, but they ask fewer questions." "And the amount?" Maria clicked. $250,000. Arthur had to grip the back of the chair. He felt lightheaded. $250,000. Added to the $82,000 in unpaid taxes. Added to the more than $200,000 in stolen rent he had just learned about. Julian wasn't just stealing. He was conducting a full-scale liquidation. "How?" Arthur said. The word choked. "How did he sign?"
"He had to file his authorization with the deed," Maria explained, her voice hardening. She was no longer just a tenant. She was a paralegal on a case. Here it is. Supporting documents. Attachment to a agent authorization. She clicked the link. A scanned PDF opened on the screen. It was a durable power of attorney, a legal document granting Gillian Pendleton full, sweeping, and immediate authority over all of Arthur Pendleton's real estate and financial affairs. "I have never," Arthur said, his voice trembling with a cold, precise rage, "seen this document in my life." "Look at the signature," Maria said. Arthur leaned closer. It was a sloppy, unsteady imitation of his own name, a forgery. Close enough to pass a cursory glance, but fundamentally wrong. It lacked the firm, practiced strokes of an architect who had signed his name on thousands of blueprints. "And look at this," Maria said, pointing to the bottom of the page. "The notary stamp. It's from a public notary in Las Vegas, Nevada. Were you in Las Vegas 19 months ago, Mr. Pendleton? I haven't left the state of Texas in over a decade. There it was, the smoking gun, a fraudulent document created in another state, used to secure a $250,000 loan against a building that Julian did not own. Now the entire horrifying picture came into focus. It was not a series of desperate, clumsy thefts. It was a single, brilliantly dark, meticulously constructed plan. An architectural demolition. Arthur began to speak, his mind putting the pieces together out loud. First, he incorporates the shell company, JP Asset Management. Then, he uses the forged power of attorney to secure the $250,000 loan from Apex Capital. They'd wire that money to the Pendleton Properties account, which he controlled as agent. Then, Arthur continued, he directs all the tenants to pay the rent into his other company, his shell company. He's collecting from two directions, a massive lump sum from the fraudulent loan and a steady monthly income from the rent. And he pays no one. Maria's eyes were wide with the audacity of it. He doesn't make a single payment on the new $250,000 mortgage. He doesn't pay the county property tax. He knows that both the lender and the county will eventually move to foreclose.
The final, devastating realization settled over Arthur. It's a time bomb. He set the fuse and walked away. He knew the lenders and the county would seize the property. It would be a legal nightmare. The tenants would be evicted, the building sold at auction. And by the time anyone untangled the legal mess of the fraudulent POA, Maria finished, he and the $500,000 would be long gone. He was using the foreclosure to cover his tracks, to burn the entire crime to the ground, leaving you to deal with the ashes. Arthur stood up and walked to the window. He looked down at the modest brick building. His building. The one he had designed, the one that was supposed to see him through his old age. Julian wasn't just stealing from him, he was trying to erase him. He thought of the phone call just yesterday. Julian's smooth, reassuring voice, "Just a scare tactic, a mix-up, I'll take care of it." He had been lying while actively gutting his uncle's life. The sheer cold-blooded nerve of it. The betrayal was total. It was not just fraud. It was an act of profound, personal cruelty. Arthur stood at the window, his back to Maria. He was 72 years old. He had just lost his retirement, his primary asset, and the last familial connection he thought he had. Julian had made two mistakes. First, he thought his uncle was a frail, forgetful old man. Second, he thought Maria was just a tenant. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Arthur Pendleton, the retired architect, had just uncovered the complete blueprint of his own financial ruin. And now he would use that same blueprint to take back his life. If you believe that the truth must be uncovered, no matter how deep it's buried, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Arthur has the what and he has the how, but what he does next is not what Julian, or you, would ever expect. You are not going to want to miss the evidence he finds next. The 6 weeks that followed were a blur of precise, tactical maneuvers. Arthur and Maria did not go to the police. A criminal case would be slow, and the foreclosure clock was ticking. They moved instead on the civil front. Maria, with Arthur's full authority, engaged her law firm. Their first act was to file a lis pendens, a notice of a pending lawsuit against the apartment building. This document, filed in the county records, was a legal red flag. It effectively froze the property, halting the bank's foreclosure and the county's tax seizure, as no one could legally take possession of an asset with a disputed title. The time bomb was, for a moment, disarmed.
Simultaneously, they filed a comprehensive civil suit against Julian Pendleton, JP Asset Management, and the private lender, Apex Capital. The suit alleged fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent conveyance, and sought an immediate injunction. Julian was served at his luxury condo. The lender, Apex Capital, was served at its high-rise office. The fight was no longer in the shadows. It was now in the public record. The case was fast-tracked. Julian, forced to act, hired an aggressive, expensive law firm. His lawyers immediately filed a motion to dismiss, which brings us to this hearing. It was not a full trial, but a preliminary hearing on the motion, held in a sterile, fluorescent-lit courtroom in downtown Dallas. Arthur sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing the same tweed jacket he'd worn to the courthouse. He was flanked by Maria and her firm's senior partner, a sharp-eyed man named David Chen. Arthur was calm, his hands resting on the handle of his old leather briefcase. Across the room sat Julian. He was immaculate in a navy blue suit, his face a mask of practiced concern. He looked every bit the successful, wronged businessman. His lawyer, a portly man named Kittredge, shuffled his papers, radiating an aura of dismissive confidence. "Your Honor," Kittredge began, addressing the judge, "we are here today on a motion to dismiss what is, quite frankly, a deeply unfortunate and tragic family dispute. We are not dealing with a crime. We are dealing with confusion." Kittredge paced slowly. "My client, Mr. Julian Pendleton, is a successful businessman. For the past several years, he has taken on the thankless burden of managing the financial affairs of his aging uncle, Mr. Arthur Pendleton. A man he loves, a man he respects, but a man who, at 72, is, let's be blunt, prone to fits of confusion. He is forgetful. He misplaces things. He gets dates wrong." Arthur stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Kittredge continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "This entire lawsuit, this attack on my client, stems from a simple, documented financial arrangement. My client, my uncle, Mr. Arthur Pendleton, asked for his help. He asked my client to take over the burden of managing his properties. He asked him to find new ways to leverage his assets. And to that end, he granted my client a full, durable power of attorney." He held up a copy of the forged document. "This is Exhibit A, Your Honor, the POA, signed, sealed, and notarized. Using this legal authority, my client consolidated his uncle's assets, created a modern management company, JP Asset Management, to streamline rental income, and yes, secured a hard money loan from Apex Capital. This was a complex financial strategy to free up capital for his uncle, capital that, I might add, Mr. Pendleton took and spent." Julian nodded slowly, a look of profound sadness on his face.
"My client has done nothing wrong," Kittredge boomed. "He has acted as a loving, dutiful nephew. And his reward? To be dragged into court by a relative who has, tragically, forgotten the very arrangement he himself requested. This is a waste of the court's time. It is a family matter that should be handled at a kitchen table, not in a courtroom. We respectfully ask that you dismiss all claims." The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses at the plaintiff table. "Mr. Chen, your response." "Thank you, Your Honor," David Chen said, rising smoothly. "Mr. Kittredge is a fine storyteller. Now, let's look at the facts. We are not here because of a, quote, family dispute. We are here because of a calculated, multi-year conspiracy to defraud a 72-year-old man of his entire life savings. The defendant's entire case rests on the fiction that my client is confused, and that this document," he held up his own copy of the POA, "is legitimate. We will prove that both are categorically false." Chen turned. The plaintiff calls Ms. Maria Alvarez to the stand. Maria, poised and professional, was sworn in. Chen began. "Ms. Alvarez, you are a tenant at the property in question." "I am, yes." "And you are also a paralegal at my firm?" "I am." "Mr. Kittredge claims that Mr. Julian Pendleton was streamlining rent. Could you please describe to the court what you discovered about JP Asset Management, LLC? Maria opened her binder. JP Asset Management, LLC was incorporated by Julian Pendleton 25 months ago. It is a shell corporation. Its address is a P.O. box, and it has no other business.
For 2 years, all tenants have been paying their rent, over $12,000 a month, directly to this entity. I have bank records from myself and 2 other tenants to prove it. And what of the property taxes and mortgage? Asked Chen. While Julian Pendleton was diverting over $288,000 in rental income to his private shell company, Maria said, her voice clear and strong, he was simultaneously failing to pay the county property tax, resulting in an $82,000 lien. He was also failing to pay the $250,000 loan from Apex Capital, triggering this foreclosure. So he was pocketing the income and ignoring the debts? Precisely. It's a classic bust-out scheme. He was taking all the cash while intentionally letting the property fall into foreclosure to cover his tracks.
Kitteridge jumped to his feet. Objection! Scheme? Bust out? The witness is speculating as to my client's intent. Sustained, the judge said. Miss Alvarez, stick to the facts. The facts, Your Honor, Chen said, are that the defendant stole over $250,000 in rent, and he did so while sending his uncle these. He placed a stack of papers on the evidence projector. These are the quarterly statements Julian Pendleton emailed to my client. They are marked paid, and here, next to them, are the official county tax records for the same period. They're marked unpaid and delinquent. This is not confusion. This is forgery. This is fraud. Kitteridge's face had lost its confident sheen. Thank you, Miss Alvarez, Chen said. Plaintiff calls Mr. Arthur Pendleton. Arthur walked to the stand. He was sworn in. He sat, hands clasped, perfectly still. Chen began. Mr. Pendleton, what was your profession for the last 45 years? I was an architect, Arthur said. His voice was not loud, but it filled the room. And in your work, what is the significance of a signature? It is a bond. It is a certification of fact. When I sign a blueprint, I am legally attesting that the structure is sound. When I sign an invoice, I am attesting that the work is complete. My signature is my word made permanent. Over your career, how many times would you estimate you have signed your name in a professional capacity? Tens of thousands, perhaps more. Chen nodded. Let's turn to the defense's argument that you are confused. Mr. Pendleton, do you manage your own finances? I have, every day for the last 50 years. I balance my checkbook by hand. I keep meticulous records. Would you show the court, please? Arthur turned his briefcase. He did not pull out one ledger. He pulled out 3, thick, heavy, leather-bound volumes. He placed them on the stand with a solid thud. These, Arthur said, opening the first one, are my professional and personal ledgers. This one begins in 1978. Every commission, every bill, every major life event. Here, in 1985, is the original purchase of the apartment building. And here, every month, is the income I was supposed to receive from it logged and accounted for.
Chen projected a page from the ledger. The handwriting was precise, elegant, and incredibly steady. It was the hand of a draftsman. Kitteridge, on cross-examination, sneered. That's very impressive, Mr. Pendleton. A lovely diary. But it doesn't change the fact that you signed this power of attorney. You're 72. You have a lot of ledgers. Isn't it possible you just forgot this one? Arthur looked at Kitteridge. For the first time, a flicker of cold anger showed in his eyes. No, Arthur said. No? You're claiming you have a perfect memory? No, Arthur said again. I am claiming that I know my own mind. I know my own business, and I know my own signature. Chen, on redirect, stepped up for the final blow. Mr. Pendleton, let's look at that signature. Exhibit A, the power of attorney. He projected the document onto the wall screen. Then, next to it, he projected Arthur's signature from his 2014 mortgage payoff, and one from a 2018 tax return, and one from a blueprint in 2020. The difference was staggering. The ledger signatures were firm, practiced, and angular.
The POA signature was a shaky, sloppy, hesitant imitation. "Mr. Kitteridge claims you signed this," Chen said. "Is that your signature?" Arthur leaned forward. He looked at the forgery. He looked at his nephew, Julian, who was now staring at the table, his mask of concern having melted away. "No," Arthur said, his voice ringing with absolute, unshakable authority. "It is not." "And you can be certain?" "I am." "We can too, Your Honor," Chen said. "The plaintiff calls Dr. Elena Rios." A woman in a sharp suit took the stand. "Dr. Rios, what is your profession?" "I am a forensic document examiner. I have been retained by the plaintiff's counsel to examine the contested power of attorney." "And what did you find?" "After analyzing the disputed signature on Exhibit A against 36 known, authenticated signatures from Mr. Pendleton, my conclusion is definitive. The signature on the power of attorney is a forgery. It is a simulation, an attempt to copy the idea of Mr. Pendleton's signature, but it fails to replicate the stroke weight, the pen lifts, the letter form connections, and the baseline alignment. They were not written by the same hand."
The courtroom was silent. Kitteridge's face was ashen. "But there's more," Chen said. "Let's look at the notarization. This document was notarized in Las Vegas, Nevada on March 19th of last year." He turned to Arthur. "Mr. Pendleton, were you in Las Vegas on that date?" "No," Arthur said. "I was in Dallas." "How can you be so certain? As Mr. Kitteridge says, it's easy to forget dates." Arthur turned to his most recent ledger. He opened it to a specific page. "I am certain," Arthur said, "because it is in my ledger. On March 19th at 2 p.m., I was at my annual physical with Dr. Evans. I have the dated receipt from his office, which has been provided as Exhibit D. I also have a credit card statement, Exhibit E, showing I purchased gasoline in Dallas at 4:35 p.m. that same day." The trap was sprung. The alibi was ironclad, documented not by a confused memory, but by a lifetime of meticulous, verifiable records. Arthur Pendleton looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, I was not in Las Vegas. I did not sign that document. I did not give my nephew permission to take out a $250,000 loan, and I did not give him permission to steal $288,000 in rent. He did not manage my affairs. He liquidated them. He lied to me. He lied to the tenants, and he has lied to this court." The judge looked at Kitteridge. "Sir, your client's defense appears to have evaporated. Do you have anything to add?" Kitteridge stood, but said nothing. The judge's voice was cold. "The motion to dismiss is denied. Based on the evidence presented, this court finds that the power of attorney is fraudulent and hereby voided. The injunction halting the foreclosure is made permanent. I am granting summary judgment in favor of the plaintiff for the full amount of stolen rent plus damages. And, Mr. Kitteridge," she said, her eyes narrowing, "I am referring this entire case, including the testimony given today, to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation into forgery and perjury." The gavel struck. It was over. Julian sat frozen as his lawyer slumped beside him. He looked up, his eyes finally meeting Arthur's. He saw no triumph, no "I told you so." He saw only the cold, unyielding finality of a blueprint that had been followed to its conclusion. He had underestimated the architect, and the architect had in the end torn his world down to the foundations.
The sound of the judge's gavel was sharp, absolute. It cut through the stunned silence of the courtroom. Julian Pendleton sat motionless, his face pale, his mask of confidence completely gone. He was no longer a slick operator. He was just a man who had been caught. The judgment was swift and total. The judge's ruling was a systematic dismantling of Julian's entire scheme.
The fraudulent power of attorney was declared void, nullified on the spot. With its foundation gone, the $250,000 loan from Apex Capital was also rendered void as a fraudulent conveyance, lifting the primary lien from the property. The foreclosure was permanently halted, and the building's title was fully and immediately restored to Arthur Pendleton. But the judge did not stop there. She granted Arthur summary judgment for the full, documented amount of the stolen rent, over $288,000 plus damages. And in the final, devastating blow, she referred the case to the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office, citing overwhelming evidence of felony forgery, aggravated perjury, and multiple counts of financial fraud. Arthur Pendleton stood, his face calm. He gathered his 3 ledgers from the witness stand, placed them one by one into his old leather briefcase, and snapped the locks shut. He gave a single, respectful nod to the judge and walked out of the courtroom, leaving his nephew to face what came next. Julian's downfall was as fast as the judgment. He was arrested 2 weeks later. The criminal case was open and shut. The evidence from the civil hearing was so thorough that a grand jury indicted him in under an hour. Faced with an ironclad alibi and forensic proof of his forgery, Julian took a plea deal. He was convicted of multiple felonies and sentenced to 7 years in state prison, forfeiting all his assets as restitution. The war was over. Arthur had won. But now he had to survey the battlefield. He got his building back, but it was not the clean asset he once owned. The $82,000 tax lien was still very real. The stolen rent was gone, tied up in Julian's bankruptcy. The tenants, including Maria, were still living in a building that had been neglected for 2 years. The foreclosure was gone, but the property was on the brink of condemnation from the city. Arthur was 72. He had his building back, but it was a wounded, bleeding thing. The logical move was to sell it as is, take the remaining equity, and finally retire. He stood outside the fourplex, just as he had 6 weeks before. He looked at the brickwork, the cracked windows, the overgrown shrubs. He had designed this building. He knew its bones. Maria walked up and stood beside him. "So, what happens now?" she said quietly. Arthur looked at her. He thought of her meticulous binder, her fierce intelligence in the courtroom. He thought of Mrs. Petrov in 1B, who had been so terrified. He looked at the structure, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't just see a compromised asset. He saw a blueprint.
Now, Arthur said, we rebuild. He thought this building was just a name on a deed. He forgot that people live here. Arthur did not sell. Instead, he walked into a bank, his head high. With his own name and his own perfect credit, he secured a new, legitimate loan. It was just enough to pay off the $82,000 tax lien and establish a fund for critical repairs. His first act was to hire a new property manager. He went to Unit 2A and knocked on Maria's door. He offered her a salary, a rent-free apartment, and a new title, managing partner. "I'm an architect," he told her. "I know how to fix the structure, but you know the law and you know the tenants. Help me run this place properly." Their work began the next day. Arthur, in his tweed jacket, was on site with contractors, managing the restoration of the building's foundation, roof, and plumbing. Maria, meanwhile, drafted new, fair lease agreements for all the tenants. She held meetings, assuring them their homes were secure. The fear that Julian had cultivated was replaced by a new, fragile sense of community. As they worked, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Petrov, no longer afraid, began sending her friends from church to talk to Maria. Other seniors, facing their own confusing situations with family managers or predatory lenders, they came to Unit 2A with their letters and their fears. Arthur and Maria realized their problem was not unique. It was an epidemic hidden behind closed doors.
They used the first restitution checks recovered from Julian's seized assets, not for themselves, but as seed money. They officially registered a new, non-profit organization. They ran it right out of the building's leasing office. They called it the Cornerstone Project. Their mission was simple, and it was twofold, built on their unique partnership. Arthur, the architect, ran the structural integrity wing. He provided pro bono building inspections for seniors, protecting them from predatory contractors. He reviewed repair quotes and taught them how to read a blueprint for their own homes. Maria, meanwhile, drafted new, fair lease agreements for all the tenants. She held meetings, assuring them their homes were secure. The fear that Julian had cultivated was replaced by a new, fragile sense of community. In the end, Arthur Pendleton proved that a building is just a collection of materials. What gives it strength is the integrity of its design. He had spent his life building foundations of concrete and steel, but the one he built with Maria, a foundation of truth and justice, would be his most enduring. This story is fictional, but the crimes of elder financial exploitation and fraud are devastatingly real. If you want to see more stories where the truth is uncovered and justice is served, subscribe to our channel. We have a new investigation and a new set of facts dropping next week.